All right, folks, without further ado, I'd like to introduce everyone to our to Jim Pratt, the Commission on National Community Services Director of Finance. He's going to go ahead and present financial management. Take it away, Jim.
Alrighty, good morning, everybody. Jim Pratt, Director of Finance Administration on the Commission staff. We're going to talk a little bit, well, a lot today about financial management and how it relates to AmeriCorps, federal reporting, the requirements we have at the Commission as far as, claiming against your grant and any financial responsibilities by your organization. Next slide, please. All right, so the agenda for today is understanding financial management and how it relates, to AmeriCorps, knowing your budget, which is the blueprint for your organization, and forms and resources that we have at the commission and at the federal level. Again, these are going to be linked, like Megan mentioned prior in her presentation. So again, these are just some links to some federal documents as far as like the federal grants and the financial requirements, codes, regulations. So 2 CFR Part 200 is basically like one of the main blueprints for federal financials. And, again, they would directly correlate to AmeriCorps. 45 CFR Chapter 25, general fiscal 2025, general terms and conditions for federal grants in general. And then there's also AmeriCorps specific terms and conditions. So we also have that link in there for you too as well to take a look at. Next slide, please. Thank you. All right, understanding financial management. So all program staff are responsible for the overall administration of the AmeriCorps program. Program directors need to take an active role. Program directors and financial managers should be familiar with the grant agreement or the contract. And the grant agreement outlines the approved budget and the budget narrative, as well as key financial and programmatic reporting requirements. And again, as we go further into this, we'll talk about the budget, get more in depth and in more detail. Next slide, please. Also wanted to note, sorry, on the prior slide, obviously not just fiscal staff are involved in this whole process, but it also includes, other, board of directors, program directors, other personnel you might have at your organization, realizing the majority of it falls on fiscal staff at the organization. And I work primarily with the fiscal staff, but again, this involves everyone at the organization on some level. Thanks, Eric, and go forward. Hold on a second. My screen's giving me issues. All right. Again, understanding financial management. Each program needs to have policies and procedures that are AmeriCorps specific. Although policies may be in place, they need to be reviewed and possibly revised to include AmeriCorps specific requirements. Generally speaking, financially, accounting wise in any organization, you need to have some sort of internal procedures, internal controls. But as I just stated, there are some things that are a little AmeriCorps specific, and at the federal level, which you'll see as we get further into this. So you always want to have and follow general financial management systems, procedures for determining reasonableness, allocability, and allowability, which again I referenced the 2 CFR 200. Internal controls within the organization, approval and documentation of expenses, separation of duties, conflicts of interest, record retention and destruction, which I believe is 7 years, but someone can correct me on that if I'm wrong. Cost allocation, or how different costs are applied, and time and effort distribution relating to your grant personnel. 2 CFR 200.430 is the area for that, to go into more detail with that. Next slide, please. Thank you. Also in accounting, obviously an accounting financial management system, again, 2 CFR Part 200. We'll also go into that in more detail, like define, what is actually required based on your specific organization. Of course, it must be a reliable and accurate accounting system. It must be capable of distinguishing grant versus non-grant related expenditures, identifying cost by the program year, identifying cost by budget category, differentiating between direct and indirect, which would be direct would be your actual program costs, and your indirect would be your administrative cost. For example, your overhead would be another way to say that. Naturally, you'd have to account for each award and grant separately. maintaining federal and non-federal matching funds separately from the grant funds. Anybody who's been with us for a long period of time or has had a program with us will know that that's one of the most important things, is distinguishing between the federal piece of your grant and your matching requirement and the match funds that are put towards your program. Recording in-kind contributions as both a revenue and an expense, allowing management to easily obtain financial reports at both the summary and detailed levels, correlating to financial reports submitted by the commission. And to the prior point, you always want to have your financial records, easily obtainable, differentiated, easy to read and tie back to your organization and your actual financial activities. Again, you could always be subject to an audit. We might need to request something from you at the program. So again, you always want to have everything organized, clear, concise, documented. From an accounting standpoint, I always tell people, always act like, an auditor's going to show up or an auditor's watching. So you always want to keep things, in line and as clear and concise and neat as possible. Next slide, please. Thank you. Knowing your program budget, which again, many of you know, this is the blueprint for your program. Again, your AmeriCorps program budget equals the blueprint. It helps to meet your organization's goals and objectives, and it ensures your match requirements are met. Some qualities of an effective budget, generally speaking, it has to be realistic, consistent with organizational objectives and goals, and flexible, meaning it's amendable if conditions are not as expected, which we'll get into a little bit more about that, how you can adjust things down the line if needed, but that's on the future slide. Next slide, please. Thanks. Knowing your program budget. Again, like I mentioned prior, it's a team effort. So board of directors, executive director, realizing not all programs have these, personnel titles, but, generally speaking, board of directors, executive director, program staff, and of course, most importantly, the fiscal staff. Regarding budgetary controls, regular monitoring of the budget to actual year-to-date and current period expenditures or outlays. So again, you're going to do a budget, before you're awarded all this as Megan mentioned, all this things that take place before the contract's even set up. But, as the initial documents are submitted, you can submit a budget, thinking the year is going to go a certain way. But again, you have to be flexible and you have to be realistic and keep tabs on that to make sure you're meeting your goals and objectives. Explaining any budget variations that are unexpected or unusual and determining necessary adjustments, which goes along with what I just said. Ensuring compliance with laws, regulations, and CNCS, or the Corporation on National Community Service, i.e. the AmeriCorps federal agency provisions, and requesting prior approvals for modifications if necessary, which again, we'll get to that. Next slide, please. Thank you. Again, to continue on knowing your program budget, budgetary controls, regular monitoring of budgets to actual year-to-date and current period expenditures or outlays. Again, things can change. You always want to keep on top of them. Explaining any budget variations that are unexpected or unusual and determining necessary adjustments. Ensuring compliance with laws, regulations, and CNCS provisions, requesting prior approvals for modifications if necessary. Next slide, please. All right, and as I mentioned on, I believe it was the initial slide or the second slide, so there are two separate sets of terms and conditions. So they'll be submitted, they'll be released usually every year. So there's usually going to be some sort of, difference from year to year. Whether it's, very small or not, like they still have to release a revised, so even if they change one thing, and we're talking multiple pages of things. So, but generally speaking, there is a general term and condition document for federal grants in general. And then there was one that gets a little more detailed as it applies to AmeriCorps grants, state national grants. And again, those links are in these slides if you wanted to take a look and, read into more about what those conditions and terms are. Next slide, please. Thank you. All right, expenditure reporting or claiming reporting schedule. So claims are always submitted quarterly, and they're due 30 days after the end of the quarter for which you're trying to get reimbursement for. They must be timely and in compliance with Schedule D of your contract. As Megan mentioned in her presentation, they're submitted via the contract management system, which is CMS. Must always include supporting documentation. And again, I stress it needs to be as clear and concise as possible. And anything you are claiming, federal or match related on a claim, needs to have backup documentation that correlates to that expense. Like I said, as clear and concise as possible and as easily laid out as possible. So when your program administrator in level 1 at CMS is reviewing it, and I review it at level 2 before I ultimately approve the payment, everything needs to be laid out as for obvious reasons, and because we are also subject to federal and state audit. Um, if you are on the competitive if you are a competitive program, you are still on the 5-quarter system that we've had for many years. If you are a formula program, as per your RFP that you applied to prior, we are now going to the new 12-month, I'm sorry, the new, 12-month, 4-quarter claiming procedure. So again, you have to, and again, I sent out claiming workbooks last week by your funding type and and award type that will correlate to how you're supposed to be reporting, because they're all tailored to the different, things we have going on this year. So again, competitive is still on the 5-quarter claiming schedule, and formula is now on the new 12-month. And I think I noted that. Yep, only applicable to programs. Okay. Next slide, please. All right. Location of financial forms. Where are the financial management forms and other resources located? Pop quiz. Thank you, Eric. That would be our website, newyorkersvolunteer.ny.gov. Basically, anything you'd want to know about the commission staff and how things, how we do things, forms, procedures, requirements, deep dive trainings. Basically, we have programmatic and financial resources all on the website. Michael and Casey do a great job on updating that and keeping that up to speed. And yeah, basically, like many things are there. Many resources are at your fingertips. Obviously, in addition to reaching out to commission staff for assistance with questions or to request a meeting. Next slide, please. Take it away, Eric.
So we are going to one of my favorite quiz questions. Go ahead and scan the QR code. I am going to put the link in the chat. I want to see how well everyone's paying attention. So the question is, which is the New York State Commission website? Is it www.volunteernewyork.org? Is it newyorkersvolunteer.ny.gov? Is it newyorkcares.org? Or is it AmeriCorps.gov? You would be shocked at how many people have gotten this question wrong in the past. I have been shocked. Probably one of the most important websites in your life. VolunteerNewYork.org, NewYorkersVolunteer.ny.gov, NewYorkCares.org, or AmeriCorps.gov. Which one is the commission website? The New York State Commission website. Us. See how everyone did. There we go. That's excellent.
Good job.
NewYorkersVolunteer.ny.gov. You guys are a sharp crew. Nice work.
Good
Very
job.
good. So, thank you very much for that. Makes me sleep better at night. Thank you.
Thanks, Eric.
Thank you. So let's
All
talk
right.
about that
And
website, Jim. Go ahead.
yep, sure. All right. So to navigate or to further talk about the website, again, it's newyorkersvolunteer.ny.gov. You want to click on resources. You want to scroll down. And again, like I mentioned prior, there's program management resources, which are more on the programmatic side of things, and there's financial management, which is, more on my side of things, the accounting and finance side. Next slide, please. All right, so we recently updated the AmeriCorps New York, or actually it's our own commission financial management guide. I sent all this, I sent the updated version out with all the expenditure claiming workbooks. That is about as up to date as we can get. And again, I stress that that has a lot of valuable information that can be used as a reference. It can be saved. I actually still use it as a reference sometimes, and it's very helpful. It's kind of like an at your fingertips booklet. If you have any questions or any you know problems, or you want to look something up, we try to keep everything in one spot, so it kind of makes it as easy, like kind of like an at your fingertips guide. Can you go back real quick, Eric?
Sorry,
Just want to
Jim.
look at something. No, no, it's okay. I just want to look at something real quick. So the expenditure reporting workbooks, we're not going to put them up only because we have like more than a few different types this year based on the current state of things. So to keep it a little less confusing, we're going to keep them off the website. But again, I've never really had anybody that had to go on, because I usually try to keep on top of those things and sending them the programs. Programs usually reach out to me anyway if there's anything reporting workbook related anyway. I just forgot to take that off. We'll get into more of these other things as we go along. So go ahead, Eric. Next slide, please.
So you just discussed
Okay.
the financial guide, right?
Yep. Yep. Next
Okay.
slide. Thanks.
All right. And this may be the outdated cover sheet, expenditure
Uh,
report cover sheet.
nope. Nope. This is an updated one.
Okay.
All right. So like I said, can you go back real quick
Sure. Sorry.
to make sure yeah, like I mentioned, I'm not gonna put them up on the website, but they are, as I said prior, they are required for each quarterly expenditure report, and they serve as a reference for all your expenses that you're claiming on a quarterly basis. Next slide, please. All right, so the cover sheet is probably the most important part of the claim itself. Yes, the backup documentation is equally as important, but the cover sheet is basically a summary of what you're trying to claim for that quarter. In addition to this year, I also added some columns to kind of tie in prior quarter claims. So it kind of keeps a running total of match and federal expenses claimed to date, which kind of will increase efficiency and internal control at your own organization to kind of make things a little bit easier. I'm assuming most of you have some sort of tracking mechanism in your accounting system, but again, gives another avenue to keep, at a quick glance, you can see, your federal expenditures to date and your match to date, in addition to the normal columns of, the federal side of things, the match for that quarter. Um, yeah, so that's basically, and as we circled at the bottom, as you saw in your workbooks, the cover sheet is number one, then you're going to have the personnel detail sheet and then the member detail, which we'll get into. Next slide, please. All right, like I said, the cover sheet is a summary of all federal expenses claimed, which is always the far left column, and all match expenses reported for a reporting period or quarter, as we do. Cover sheet must be completed with all claims, whether you're fixed or cost reimbursement grant. The data on the cover sheet on the far left column, the federal side, always needs to mirror CMS, as CMS does not track match. You do not input match in CMS. CMS is strictly federal funds. So you're going to claim whatever you put on the far left side, the far left column for federal reimbursement on the cover sheet needs to mirror CMS to the penny. For obvious reasons, and because it'll get kicked back, and accounting will not pay that out if they do not match. Ensure there is clear and concise backup documentation for federal and the match parts of the claim. We also need, like I said before, documentation for match, because again, we are subject to audit, and we also still have to have backup, whether it's federal claim or a match claim. Next slide, please. All right. So I put this in here just because, there's some programs you don't necessarily like, I realize it's a lot to fill out, but again, we have to keep track of all these things. And these are all, proper protocols and how things should be done each quarter. So please, when you're filling out the cover sheet, please complete all fields at the top, including the program name, the correct program year, the period, The other federal funds is match if you're using that for that specific quarter claim, and then what quarter you are actually claiming against. And to note, if you're a competitive program, again, you are still on the 5 quarter. So those competitive claiming workbooks that I sent out will still have a 5th quarter in the drop-down menu. Formula programs will only have the 4 quarters now, just to kind of make it less confusing for those who have been with us for a while and are used to the 5 quarter on a formula contract. So again, I took that 5th quarter out, so you only have the 4 quarters on the drop-down for the formula programs. Next program, next slide, please. All right. So the second most important one is your personnel detail sheet, which again should line up with your budget as far as usage percentages go. A lot of you in your budget will have, for example, a program director at 50% usage. So in theory, on a claim, I shouldn't see anybody being claimed, a program director being claimed more than 50%. There is some room there for variance. Like I do have some bit of a tolerance. But for example, if you have a program director who's budgeted at 50% and you're claiming them at 100% every quarter, there's obviously an issue. So you need to do some sort of budget modification or really a spending adjustment. But again, this personnel sheet lines up to the personnel you're charging for on the federal side and the match side on the cover sheet. But this is just a breakdown of what makes up that total for your personnel. And it's pretty self-explanatory. The position title, the name of that staff member, check number, check date, the payroll period, how much you're charging to federal, how much you're charging to match for that quarter. Again, I try to keep it as self-explanatory as possible. But again, this is also needed as backup for personnel that you're claiming, in addition to payroll records that should also be uploaded for personnel as well. Next slide, please. This was new last program year. I kind of just try to mirror off the personnel detail, but it's basically a list of active AmeriCorps members in a reporting period, and it must match the information in the AmeriCorps portal. Cover sheet must be completed with this member activity report. Again, this will tie to the living allowance line on the cover sheet, which for this program year, you'll notice on the new program workbooks I sent out, we do not have it varied by slot anymore on the cover sheets. So, and I believe, and one of the contract managers can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe all the new contract setups are going to have only the one line in CMS, which will mirror the cover sheet. So again, it's a little less convoluted, a little more simpler, a little more streamlined when you're claiming for AmeriCorps members and their living allowances. And again, based on row 23 of the cover sheet, which, like I said, it will correlate. Members should always include AmeriCorps members who are receiving a living allowance, not staff or i.e. personnel. Include only those documents that need to support the claim. Next slide, please, Eric. Now, I will say to the previous slide, there are some programs who have many, many AmeriCorps members. So there are certain situations where I will let that sheet slide because of the administrative burden. Again, we're talking like I'll have programs that'll send me 5 pages of member, living allowance payment documentation. As long as I have the payroll records with the claim, it's kind of a case by case basis. So normally I want that filled out, but again, to ease the administrative burden on some of the programs that have a gazillion AmeriCorps members, and good for them, high retention rate. I'll let that slide, but again, it's a case by case basis. Budget modification request form, or as most of you may know this as, is a spending adjustment. So basically, this is a form that you can fill out. So you have your budget that you submit before the program year starts, before the whole contracting process starts, and all your pre-documents are sent over. You have your budget with the federal and the match. Your budget's been approved by us, by me, AmeriCorps. But say you get a couple months into the program year and you're like, you know what, we're not really going to spend this much money on it. And again, this is only for federal funds, not match funds. So say you're pre-approved for a certain amount, your award amount, and you're like, you know what, we're not really going to spend as much as we thought. And for example, personnel, we're going to spend more on, staff travel. We need more staff travel. So there is a way for you to move money around within federal lines in your budget. Again, it's pretty self-explanatory. We try to keep it as simple as possible. So you have your original approved budget, then you have the requested amount that you want to move around. And then the far right column is going to be your new budget that you're requesting. And again, both bottom lines should be the same because your federal award hasn't changed for that year, but you still have to show like where you want to move the money around. This will go to your program administrator first for review. That will come to me as a second review and approval, and then it goes to our Bureau of Contracts Management, which signs off as the final approval, and then I will notify, or your PA will notify you, and then I will upload it to your specific, that program years, tab in CMS contract documents, because, there's different, periods. So this will also be uploaded by me in CMS once it's fully approved and signed off on. And then you are free to, um, claim against, the spending adjustment. And again, when I review the claim, I will have your original budget in CMS. Then I will also have the spending adjustment. So if something looks wonky, I'll look and see if you have a spending adjustment, and it'll kind of like fill in the hole as to why this claim doesn't look right. But then they had a spending adjustment, move money around, so they're okay and they're covered. But again, and I believe if the change is 10% or more of the contract value, it has to go through a formal amendment, which that's a program administrator thing. I actually haven't seen that since I've been here, but again, just a general rule of thumb. Next slide, please. All right, match waiver request. So as most of you know, you have a match requirement based on the year of funding, how many years you've had an AmeriCorps program. Unless you were on the 22 AFF using unspent funds, you are on a new match schedule this year, which I highlighted when I sent out your workbooks. I also track match on my end, so I will also keep you apprised throughout the year or towards the end of the year, if you're not meeting the match requirement, if you're over your administrative cap for that year. There's also there's also an administrative cap on the sub-grantee match side. So again, I keep all these things tracked on my end, as you should as well. But, I will kind of like reach out if it gets towards the end of the year and things don't look like they're being met or there's an overage. I try to work with everybody, and so everybody's on the same page and we don't have to do any disallowances for match underages or anything like that. But that being said, if you feel like you are going to be unable to meet your match requirement for that program year, AmeriCorps does allow you, and we allow you to submit a match waiver request through us, basically, explaining why you need or why you want the reduced match percentage, all the way down to zero. You basically have to lay it out why you feel you're not going to be able to meet it. You submit it to us, we review it. I will submit it to AmeriCorps, the federal agency themselves. We're getting quicker answers now that there's a lot of staff back at the agency. So we're getting, usually in about a week or two, I'll get an answer back if it's been approved. And most of the time they're approved, that we don't usually ever have a problem. They might reach out to you if they have clarifying questions regarding your request. But again, this is for, significant need if you're not going to be able to meet the match request. And again, it can be a reduced match percentage all the way down to 0%.
Jim,
Next slide.
there's a question in the chat by Alex. If we aren't claiming for AmeriCorps member living allowances, should we still fill out the member detail sheet?
Hold on one second. Sorry.
And it looks like Michael may have answered it. A member activity report, for example, a list of active members should be included with each expenditure claim, even if not claiming reimbursement or reporting match for member costs.
All right. Thanks, Eric. So to Alex's question, if you are not claiming living allowances, then no, I don't need that sheet because, there's nothing there that I would need support for. But I mean, that's a valid question. So no, if you're not claiming any living allowance, like, some programs will just claim personnel or administrative for a quarter, then you wouldn't need a member sheet. So no, you wouldn't, Alex.
Thanks, Eric.
Can I follow up with?
Sorry,
sure.
real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Just wondering, but if we do have a match requirement, then it may make sense if we are paying for the members' living allowance, then we would fill out that sheet and put that it's the match, it's our funds covering it.
Yes. Sorry, I misunderstood the question. So yes, if you're claiming, so whether it's federal or match claim, because it's going to be, even though you don't put the match piece in CMS, you still need to show it on the cover sheet, and you still need to show, yes, the member activity. If all your members are matched for that quarter or whatever, you would still need to supply that sheet. and the payroll documents to show, because you still have to report the match. But yeah, federal or match, I would need, those
Everything.
backup sheets. Yep,
Okay, thank you.
sure.
I can just jump in for a second, Jim, real quick. Just to clarify a little further, like Jim won't need that information necessarily if you're not claiming living allowance or reporting match, but we as the program staff would still like to see a list of active members with each claim. So even if you don't have costs, we would ask that you submit a list of the active members for that quarter.
Yes, that's a good point.
Thanks.
Thanks, Michael. It's a good point. Yeah, thank you. I think that's it. Eric, next slide, please. All right. And this is just, again, this is our program year. So the current, well, not really in the current program year. So program year 24-25, the one that's kind of sunsetting at this point. We still do have the old reporting schedule up if you ever need to reference that. But again, we'll have the new one up as well, which again, the 4 or 5 quarters will depend on your funding source. But just for an FYI, we're still going to leave up the 2024-25 reporting schedule just for reference. Next slide, please. All right, timesheets. So again, on our website, we have a sample timesheet for, an AmeriCorps living member, an AmeriCorps member for their living allowance, and for personnel. Just a general rule of thumb, as long as I have, and again, to kind of ease administrative burden, and it's not really a requirement, I checked with our financial consultant, it's kind of up to the commission staff, each state commission. I don't necessarily need timesheets with every claim, but I still need payroll backup documentation. If something looks wonky or something looks like I need a further question, you obviously always have to have timesheets, on file, personnel, members. They always have to be easily available. They need to be signed properly. They need to be filled out properly. But again, as long as I have, those detail sheets filled out and payroll documentation, again, if something looks off, I'm going to reach out and ask for timesheets, and I'm going to need to see them, which will be supplemental documentation. So, but again, obviously, you always need timesheets properly done on file, for obvious reasons. But again, just to ease administrative burden, I don't need them with every claim, but they always need to be readily available upon request. Next slide, please. We also have another resource on our website is we have an AmeriCorps financial consultant we've worked with for many years. So a few times a year, we'll go into what we call deep dive training. So Eric or Michael have put up the recordings of those deep dive trainings. Her name is Susan Mesh. She used to work for the federal government. So she's very, very, AmeriCorps is her language. So she's provided very, very good deep dive trainings on specific financial topics. And again, those are all on our website, those recordings for your viewing and educational pleasure. Next slide, please. Take it
All
away,
right,
Mr.
folks.
Stave.
Thank you very much, Jim. So our final question for financial management, I dropped the link in the chat, and just take a second. The question is, what form is required with every quarterly expenditure report? What form is required with every quarterly expenditure report? Is it A, an expenditure claim cover sheet? Is it 2, a spending adjustment claim form? Or is it Schedule Z? What form is required with every quarterly expenditure report? Is it an expenditure claim cover sheet, a spending adjustment claim form, or a Schedule Z? I'll just give everyone a second to answer that question. What form is required with every quarterly expenditure report? See how everyone did. Excellent. Expenditure claim cover sheet. Good job, everyone.
Love
Nice
it.
work.
Good
That's
job.
beautiful. That is a beautiful thing right there.
Thanks,
Does
Eric.
anyone have any questions for Jim?
And per usual, I'm always available via email if you want to set up a call, shoot me a phone call. I'm always available for questions, comments, concerns.
Does anyone have any questions for Jim about financial management?
All righty. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Eric.
Excellent. Thank you very much.